The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Xavier Bettel, Prime Minister, Minister of State, Minister for Communications and Media, and Minister for Religious Affairs of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Xavier Bettel, Prime Minister, Minister of State, Minister for Communications and Media, and Minister for Religious Affairs of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that I'm particularly moved to be speaking to you here today. I recall that last year we all had to speak to each other through computer screens, unable to interact and be unable to react. And in my message, I expressed the hope that we would soon be able to see each other in person. We are doing that now, even if it is in hybrid mode, but we are seeing each other. We're coming closer together. And if we are now able to speak from this rostrum, it is thanks to the devotion, the perseverance, and the ingenuity of all of those who have worked tirelessly over the past year and a half to stem, slowly but surely, the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm referring to the scientists, the researchers, the doctors, the healthcare personnel, and all of those who made it possible for us to survive. And who could have known 12 months ago that many effective vaccines against the coronavirus would have been developed so quickly so that we could get together. New York, which was hard hit by the pandemic, this week has yet again become the capital for multilateral diplomacy and action. However, we do note that many statements are being delivered by video and events are taking place virtually. So that's proof that we will not be returning to the pre-COVID conditions anytime soon. We all know full well the pandemic is dragging on and its socioeconomic impact is still being felt by all of our peoples. 4.5 million people have succumbed to the virus. 124 million people have now been plunged into extreme poverty. School children have lost more than 1.8 billion hours of in-person learning due to the pandemic. Mr. President, I'll speak about hope a little later on, but education is part of the hope that many people have. So the pandemic has forced us to recognize the urgent need to change the way we do things. Business as usual is no longer an option. We must bolster our collective action within the multilateral system with, of course, the United Nations at the very heart. Mr. President, Luxembourg congratulates you on your election, and you can count on the support of our delegation in carrying out your very important mandate, and I thank you very much for taking the time this morning to have an exchange with me and to allow me to speak about hope, which I will address a little later on in my statement. You determined the theme for this assembly should be one of hope, and I think that's a wise choice. It's a wise choice because today we hear news that gives us countless reasons to lose hope. The pandemic is ever present. We hear the statistics as soon as we get up in the morning, how many people have gone to hospital, how many people are sick. We have ongoing crises and conflicts. I'll just mention two of them, the crisis in Afghanistan, where the takeover of the country by the Taliban is jeopardizing progress achieved in the past 20 years in terms of democratic governance and development and human rights, in particular for Afghan women and girls. And what can be said of the climate crisis? Its devastating fallout has spared no country. This morning I spoke with you and I spoke with other colleagues about the climate crisis. It's one of very survival. We've faced severe weather events, tornadoes and flooding, but other countries are dealing with their very existence, and that will depend on the choices that we make here. So it would be irresponsible for us to resign ourselves to this fate, because we must have hope. There is reason to hope. Hope should inspire us to act and to respond. The time for blah blah is over. We must act and react. Hope springs eternal, as the saying goes, but in order to survive, we must breathe life into hope. If we don't have hope, people will stop believing in anything. We have to take concrete action which will allow for de facto solidarity, as Robert Schuman said in the Declaration on Rebuilding Europe. As political leaders, we must act together with determination to meet these global challenges together. The closure of borders, the building of walls, for example, we have to stop thinking of all of that. That's not the answer. We know that we do not have all the answers as governments. We must, in order to succeed, we must work together with private sector stakeholders, civil society, and our citizens, and in particular our youth, who are rightly worried about the decisions that we're taking today, or our non-action, if you will. They're worried about their future. Our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has appealed to us to do just that, and I thank him for his action, and I renew my congratulations to him and my sincere wishes for success during his second mandate at the helm of our organization. In our common agenda, he has outlined our responsibilities, and I agree with him when he says that we're at a turning point in history. My country is a founding member of the UN, and for many years we've been committed to multilateralism and to world order based on the rule of law. And today my country is prepared to respond to the Secretary General's appeal to create a more robust, more effective, more inclusive, and more networked multilateral system. This is the only way to safeguard peace and security, sustainable development in all its aspects, including health, respect for the rule of law, and human rights. The pandemic has forced us to make difficult choices, to act quickly, not always certain that we had the right response to tackle such unprecedented circumstances. We have all learned on the job. We realized that certain decisions should have been taken yesterday or the day before yesterday, and we have decisions that we need to take today. We are pleased to see that the scientific community has moved forward. When I spoke earlier about this self-centeredness, this the walls that we build, if every country were to keep that information just for their own country, how much we would miss in not having these changes. Of course, change is not easy, in particular if some countries around us are doing the opposite. Working with Belgium, France, and Germany, we called each other. We said, well, let's try this, let's do that. We need to exchange. And we've been able to convince many more people to become vaccinated. We have some 75% of people over the age of 12 who are vaccinated in Luxembourg. More than 6 billion doses of the vaccine have been administered to date. That is an impressive figure, it's true, but it still falls far short. We need 11 billion doses to exceed the 70% threshold of vaccinated people worldwide in order to get beyond the most acute phase of the pandemic, because we are not yet safe from more contagious variants and mutations of the virus. They are frightening. And access to vaccines is not equal. The Secretary General has reminded us that if we do not tackle this issue now, we will never get out of it. We understand the importance of vaccine solidarity. Last year and this year, as a country, we contributed some 2 million euros to the COVAX mechanism for global access to COVID-19 vaccines. In July, my government decided we would share 350,000 doses of vaccine with partner developing countries in Africa and Asia. And on September 13th, the first batch was delivered. Luxembourg provided 56,000 doses of vaccine to Cape Verde, along with medical material to administer the vaccine through a European civil protection mechanism. We can still see the images in our mind when people didn't have enough ventilators. We could see these ventilators, the masks on the tarmacs of airports. We knew that we had to do something in order to get this material where it was needed. That's a very sad image to keep in our minds. We were able to buy ventilators enough so that we can share them with others. We've done so with India, Nepal, and Tunisia, and we're providing refrigerators for vaccine storage to Laos, Sudan, Burkina Faso, and Senegal. And we are continuing to provide international solidarity to combat the pandemic. Also, I had the opportunity to stress that point during the summit organized the day before yesterday by President Biden. I have every hope we'll overcome the pandemic if we work together, if we count on solidarity in science, and also if we're able to halt the spread of misinformation, which still exists, and it's fueled by social media, through social networks and through Facebook. That fuels anti-vaccine skepticism. There are many people who still have questions, who still have doubts, and we need to reassure them. We mustn't stigmatize them. We will not be able to vaccinate 100% of the people. There will always be people who do not want to be vaccinated, but for those who still have doubts, we should answer their questions and not put them in the corner. They must learn along with us. And today, in order to stem the spread of misinformation, we need to react. There's a role for the press to play. Fake news should not be leading the news media. We must have increased cooperation with other member states. And the independent panel established by the Director General of the WHO has made some useful recommendations in this area. Mr. President, 6 years ago, we concluded a historic agreement in Paris. As I said earlier, climate change since then has shown that we must make even greater contributions and go even further in implementing our commitments. We can't continue to make commitments and not follow through. If we remain on the current path, the temperature will rise 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. So we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial levels. This morning we had an exchange, Mr. President, about the fallout of global warming for some. Some countries tomorrow may not even exist. If the ice continues to melt, I have Belgium, France, I have other countries around me, but imagine if you come from a small country, if we don't all act together, your country could actually disappear. How would that be? I believe the European Union has made a strong commitment, and I'm very grateful for that. And we thank people who came to the Paris Agreement and who will continue to work. Some countries who no longer wish to be part of the Paris Agreement will that will be counteractive. All of those countries who have stayed with the Paris Agreement, thank you very much. It is important to reduce the net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55%. And in Luxembourg, we now have a policy. We have more than doubled our renewable energy production over the past 5 years. We also must keep our word to developing countries and help them bolster their capacity to manage the effects of climate change. My country has decided to double its international climate financing, bringing it up to 200 million euros from 2021 to 2025. And I can tell you that for Luxembourg, this climate financing is above and beyond our official development aid, for which we continue to earmark at least 1% of our GDP. I've been Prime Minister since 2013. Over the past 8 years, People have often said to me, do you think it's still worthwhile to maintain that 1% of our GDP? And I say yes. It's true that some people say, well, you have problems at home as well, but to cut aid to countries most in need, that would be selfish. Defending cooperation in your own countries and not sharing with others, wanting to help others, would be wrong. Mr. President, COP26 will take place soon in Glasgow. This will be a moment of truth, and I hope that we will all be there and will take decisions to safeguard the right of future generations to live in a healthy environment. When I speak about youth, UNICEF estimates that more than 1 billion children are exposed to climate shocks, President. The climate crisis is therefore also a crisis to the rights of the child. And in this context, my country is particularly proud to be a member of the School Meals Coalition, as I mentioned the day before yesterday at the UN Food Systems Summit. Effective school meal programs are an intelligent investment in future generations because they create opportunities, particularly for young girls and women. Human rights are put to the test every day due to the climate crisis and the pandemic, and also due to wars and conflicts which give rise to unconscionable crimes in Afghanistan, in the Sahel, in the Near East, Syria, Yemen, in Ethiopia. Promoting human rights nationally and internationally is a priority for us, and we want to continue to shoulder our responsibilities in this area, and that is why my country has submitted its candidacy to serve on the Human Rights Council from 2022 to 2024. This will be our first term as a member of the Council, and if we are honored to be elected by this Assembly to the Human Rights Council during voting next month, I can assure you that my country will protect and promote the rights of all human beings in a spirit of dialogue and cooperation. We intend to work closely with the UN human rights mechanisms, and we are committed to hearing the voices of civil society, which is essential to the very functioning of the Council and the UN. We have 4 priorities which are reflected in our voluntary pledges and commitments. Firstly, supporting the rule of law, civic space, human rights defenders, and combating impunity. I reaffirm our support for the International Criminal Court and the follow-up and investigations mechanisms within the United Nations. Secondly, a human rights-based approach to sustainable development and climate action. We recognize the importance of the right to development, and our ambitious cooperation policies and climate action take account of the very strong link between the implementation of the Sustainable Development Programme by 2030, combating climate change, and respecting human rights worldwide. Thirdly, gender equality and combating all forms of discrimination. My country has a very strong policy on women. And as we discussed this morning, Mr. President, I'm sorry to keep recalling that, but we discussed a number of issues this morning. We are committed to ensuring their rights to the self-determination of women and girls. It's unfathomable today that men in some countries of the world think they know better than women do. If that's the reality of our world today, that's terrible. If a man thinks that he knows better and can make the decision for a woman, I'm speaking about health, education, sexual and reproductive rights. I think in 2021, it's really high time for us to make sure that every individual has the right to decide for him or herself. We are also working to protect the rights of LGBTI persons. Fourthly, we will continue to invest systematically in the rights of the child. Human rights are also human rights of migrants and refugees. Let us think for a moment about the people who were forced to flee Afghanistan, the journalists, the human rights defenders, judges, prosecutors, teachers, all of those who, because of their activities, whom we asked to be our partners, who are now directly threatened. We cannot leave them. Let's not let them down. They were our partners. They've been our partners. And I'm very pleased that the European Union will be holding a conference on resettling vulnerable Afghans at the request of Luxembourg primarily. That will be done in the coming months by the European Commission. We recognize that there are tensions between states and there's a serious crisis of confidence. I'm not too reassured by hearing colleagues over the past few days. It's really up to us to create dialogue. We have to restore trust. We have to give hope to dialogue among countries and with the countries with whom we have contacts, so that we can avoid conflicts for not just future generations, but today's generation. Turning to the Secretary General's proposal to have a new contract, we are prepared to lend a helping hand to restore trust and respect for international law. And of course, we need to ensure lasting peace. We're also prepared to help reshape the United Nations to make it better able to play its pivotal role in multilateral cooperation. Change is never easy, but we must not resign ourselves to say, well, since it's too hard to do, let's do nothing. We support calls to improve the General Assembly and reform the Security Council to make it more representative, more effective, and more accountable to all member states. Mr. President, as I said, there is reason to hope. There's reason to persevere. Let's not give up. Let's act. Let's cooperate to overcome the challenges facing humanity. You know, I've never known war. I've never seen conflict. I'm part of that generation. On my continent, other individuals have not been so lucky. And we owe it to those who have given their lives defending values. There's an American cemetery full of American soldiers who didn't even know where Luxembourg is, but they died so that I could live in democracy today. We need to find solutions together today. We should not relive the past. We owe it to everyone. When I speak about hope today in 2021, hope is not the same for everyone. In some countries, some young people just hope to survive. For some, they hope to have an education. For some, they hope to have access to health care. Here, we are asking whether or not we should have a booster shot, and some people in other countries are asking whether or not they can get the first shot. Whether one is black or white, mixed race or Asian, that should not be an obstacle to social success. Is it too much to say, well, this is the way I'm born, shouldn't I have the same hopes as other people do? Is it normal? I should be able to practice my religion without fearing reprisals. I should have the right to be a transgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and not be forced to live a secret life because others have determined what is sexually appropriate. Is that too much to ask? If I'm Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, Hindu, Protestant, should I wonder whether or not I can practice my religion freely? Should I fear going into a mosque, into a church, into a synagogue? Hope today is something that depends on where a person is born, what a person's ethnic origin, skin color, sexuality. Mr. President, if I have one hope, it is that the hopes of mankind yesterday become the reality for future generations. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank Prime Minister, Minister of State, Minister for Communications and Media, and Minister for Religious Affairs of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan to introduce an address by the head of government.